Today we're going to talk about the personal statement. So let's talk about that wonderful essay that you have to write in order to apply for the next step in your medical career, be it residency or medical school. This always gives people so much stress, and so I want to make this simple and hopefully helpful for you by giving you 5 do's and 5 don'ts for the personal statement. These are things that I've realized just from reading a ton of personal statements over the years, and so hopefully, regardless of what stage you're at, this will be some helpful information. Let's talk about the personal statement in general for a second. I always tell my students that the personal statement is more likely to lose an interview than to gain you an interview. And the reason for that is because if you do something or write something that's a little bit controversial or even offensive, it can be grounds for your application not to be reviewed any further. And so for that reason, it's important for your personal statement to hit those do's, but to really avoid some pitfalls. And we'll talk about what those things are. So in that sense, the personal statement's a good place to play it safe, because you don't want this to be the reason that you lose an interview. Now that said, every single year when I review applications, there's always 1 or 2 personal statements that really stick with me and make me really want to meet that candidate. And so if you can write that perfect personal statement, go for it. Just be careful that you're not getting too weird or too controversial to do it, and I'll tell you exactly what that means. So let's start with the do's. Number 1, be personal. This is, after all, a personal statement. This is a chance for the admissions committee to get to know you as a person. So a good example of this, I actually wrote about my own experience as a medical student after my clinical skills instructor listened to my heart and heard a heart murmur. And because of that, I ended up seeing a doctor, getting an echo, getting an EKG, and going through that process. And I kept it lighthearted in the personal statement. I never said that it was this big deal because it really wasn't, and I'm totally fine. But the point though is that because I told a personal story and because I told other stories in the personal statement about my experiences, people could get a sense of who I was as an applicant or who I was as a person. So it's important to still remember the personal statement is exactly that. It's personal. Number 2, make sure you tell them how you're unique. You want to tell the committee and you want to show the committee what makes you different than your colleagues who are also applying for a spot. You're not trying to put other people down, but you're just trying to highlight what makes you special. Maybe it's distance traveled. And when I say distance traveled, I think all of you know I don't mean like you went from San Francisco to New York. But what I mean though is that like what are the trials and tribulations of your life that you have lived through and dealt with that maybe other people haven't? So that people get a sense of who you are and what your story is, what it took for you to get to where you are. The other thing to think about in terms of what makes you unique is maybe you bring something special to the table, and this is the time to highlight that. You want to do it in a kind of a low-key way so that it's not overly ostentatious and braggy, but at the same time though, make sure that you do include that in some way in your personal statement. Number 3, make sure that you talk about your strengths. This is a place where you can talk about what makes you a really great candidate. And so what I mean by that is maybe you are just a natural leader, or maybe you're very organized, or you're very hardworking. Now you don't want to list it off in a bunch of like, I'm hardworking, organized, I'm a leader, because that sounds kind of like you're running for student council president when you're in 6th grade. Instead, what you want to do is you want to use stories again. You want to talk about maybe something that you did. Maybe you led an organization to accomplish something that helped a whole community out. And so by using those stories and by using your experiences, you can demonstrate some of the qualities that you had that do make you a great applicant. Number 4, tell them what your goals are for the future. They want to know what you want to accomplish far, far down the road. So maybe this is a time to say, in 15 or 20 years, this is where I see my career going. This is how I see myself practicing medicine or dermatology or whatever it might be in the future, so that they get a sense of who they're recruiting. Maybe this program really wants to recruit researchers. And then so in your personal statement, if you say, hey, listen, I really don't want to do research. All I want to do is see patients. That is super important. We need people to see patients, but maybe this program isn't the right program for you. So it's important to think about what your goals are, and really before you even apply, to think about whether it matches the goals of the program that you're applying to. Finally, number 5, and this ties a little bit in with number 4. What are you looking for in a program? You want to find a program that's going to help you succeed as a student, as a resident, whatever that might be. And so it's important to make sure that the strengths of that program match the strengths of you and your goals as an applicant. So if you can convey all of that in your personal statement and to show why this program and you as an applicant are a good fit together, and that is so helpful for the reader to understand why you might be a great person for them to interview. Now let's move on to the fun ones. Let's talk about the 5 things you shouldn't do, the don'ts of a personal statement. Number 1, don't be weird. What I mean by that is that every year we get a personal statement that's just a little bit too strange. This is not the time to be writing haikus or to write an entire personal statement in iambic pentameter. You have to be careful, because if you're a little bit too out there, then it's possible that the admissions committee will say, we're gonna play it safe and let's interview someone else who we're probably more likely to take. Number 2 on the list of don'ts. Do not regurgitate your CV. The admissions committee will see your CV. They will already see all the great things that you've done, and you're probably describing them in the application portal. Instead, this is a place for you to expound on certain items on your CV that are really important to you. Third don't. Do not feel like you have to stick with a timeline. There's no reason the personal statement has to start from when you're a baby all the way to when you're applying. The point is that it doesn't have to be a chronological order. It's okay for it to bounce around a little bit as long as it makes sense within the statement. So you have more freedom than that. You don't have to pretend like it's just a march through time. Number 4. Don't talk about something if you're uncomfortable talking about it during the interview. Maybe you have something about yourself that you don't want to talk about. Maybe there's something that happened in your past that is really important to who you are. But every time you talk about it, it hurts so much and it's so devastating that you just know that you can't handle that during an interview. I would really consider not including that in your personal statement, because it's very likely that that can come up during your interview. What I tell all of my mentees is, if it's in your application, it's fair game for the interview. It's basically signaling to the admissions committee that you're willing to talk about this, you're willing to bring this up in conversation. If it's something you really don't want to talk about, I'd really suggest not putting it into your personal statement. Number 5. Don't reuse a personal statement that doesn't fit. Sometimes people will apply for multiple specialties. A great example of this is dermatology and a combined medicine and dermatology residency program. So we have a lot of applicants sometimes who apply for a combined program, but then use their dermatology personal statement and not change a single word. The problem with that is that you're applying for a program that is fundamentally different. So then the main issue is, do you even want to be in a program like this? Or if you're just reusing an old personal statement from a different specialty, that's not going to look good when you're applying for something different. This seems like a no-brainer, but I see it happen all the time. So it's important to make sure that your personal statements are pertinent to the place, the program, the type of specialty that you're applying to. So those are my 5 do's and my 5 don'ts for personal statements, and I hope that's helpful for all of you. If you have any questions, comments, or maybe if you disagree, feel free to drop a comment below. These are tips that I've come up with over the last 8 to 10 years of advising medical students and advising pre-med students. If you thought this video was helpful for you, hit like below. If you thought that this is the type of information that you're interested in, then hit subscribe. I hope that this was helpful for all of you who are applying for that next step in your medical career. And until next time, see you later.